So picture this. It's the late 1890s, right?
Okay.
And the absolute smartest, most heavily funded scientific mind in America builds this magnificent flying machine.
The establishment genius.
Exactly. He launches it with massive fanfare. All the press is there, and then he just watches it crash straight into the icy waters of the Potomac River.
A spectacular, incredibly expensive failure.
Right. But then, literally just a few years later, you've got these two brothers from Ohio.
They're Wright brothers.
Yeah, guys who built bicycles and, fidgeted with cardboard boxes for fun, and they completely conquered the sky.
It's wild.
It is. So today on this deep dive, we're exploring exactly why those bicycle mechanics completely humiliated the academic geniuses.
And more importantly, why that exact same secret is, well, it's quite literally the only way you're going to survive the age of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, because we're pulling all of this from a really fascinating editorial today, aren't we?
We are. It's a singular, deeply provocative piece by William L. Weaver.
Titled, The Synthetic Polymath, Poetical Science and the Renaissance of Mind.
Right. And Weaver's core premise is that we are fundamentally, totally misinterpreting what artificial intelligence is about to do to us.
Because the usual panic, you hear it everywhere, is all about human obsolescence.
Oh, absolutely. The factory floor metaphor.
Right. A machine comes into the factory, it stamps the metal faster than you can, and boom, you are out of a job.
Yeah, and now we look at generative AI writing code or drafting these complex legal briefs, and we think
that exact same factory metaphor is happening to our brains.
Exactly. But Weaver is telling us to completely invert that expectation.
Inverted how? Like we're not being replaced.
No, we're not looking at human replacement. We're looking at a grand intellectual inversion.
Okay, I like the sound of that.
Right. He's saying the era of narrow, siloed human specialization is ending. And this broad classical way of thinking, the way of the polymath, is basically roaring back into relevance.
The polymath, like the Renaissance folks.
Precisely. But to really grasp why the polymath is our only way forward, we kind of have to look under the hood of the technology itself, Yeah,
we have to understand how the machine actually thinks.
Versus how a human thinks.
Right, because Weaver uses two very specific terms for this.
Yeah.
In the editorial. He says AI functions through what he calls mathematical reduction.
Yes.
While human intuition operates through spatial steering.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you are listening to this on your commute or, while cooking dinner, mathematical reduction probably sounds like the title of a really dry graduate seminar.
It does sound pretty dense.
Yeah. So let's break that down into something we can actually visualize.
Yeah.
What is the machine literally doing when I sit down and type a prompt into it?
Okay, so to grasp mathematical reduction, you have to imagine the architecture of a large language model, what the scientists call a vector manifold.
A vector manifold.
Right. Imagine a library. But instead of physical shelves organized by, the Dewey Decimal System.
Right, no dusty books.
No dusty books. It's this vast, invisible space with literally thousands of dimensions.
Thousands, wow.
Yeah, and in this space, every single concept, every word, every pixel is assigned a precise mathematical coordinate.
Based on what?
Based on its relationship to everything else in that space.
So words are essentially translated into numbers, and those numbers act like GPS coordinates.
Precisely. So if you plot the word dog, it sits in a certain, neighborhood of this high dimensional space.
Okay, that makes sense.
And wolf is parked right next door.
Because they're related.
Right. But car is miles and miles away.
Got it.
But the relationships get incredibly complex. Like the distance between the coordinate for king and the coordinate for man is the exact same mathematical distance as the space between queen and woman.
Oh, that's wild. So it maps out the gender relationship purely through distance.
Exactly. The AI doesn't actually understand what a queen is. It has no concept of royalty.
It just knows the geometric shape of our language.
Yes. So when you give the AI a messy, unstructured prompt, it isn't reading your words and contemplating them like a person would.
Right.
It is plotting your words as coordinates, drawing a shape, and then calculating the most probable mathematical path through that massive library to retrieve the words that fit the pattern.
Okay, so that's the reduction part.
Yeah.
It literally reduces human thought to geometry and probability.
And it does this with billions of parameters in milliseconds. It's an alien perfectly tuned execution engine.
But Weaver points out a huge flaw with that, right?
Well, yeah, the engine is completely blind.
Right. It has no actual destination.
Exactly. It requires the second half of the equation, which is the human side, the spatial steering.
And Weaver describes this using a concept called simulated annealing, which, I mean, I know annealing is a term from metallurgy.
Right, blacksmithing.
Yeah, like when you forge a sword, you heat the steel up to this blistering temperature, the atoms move around chaotically, violently, and then you cool the metal very slowly. And as it cools, the atoms settle into a much stronger, more perfect crystalline structure than they had before.
That's the physical process, yeah.
But how on earth does blacksmithing apply to talking to a chatbot?
It actually translates directly to how we navigate that high-dimensional vector space we just talked about.
Yeah.
In machine learning, temperature is a literal parameter you can adjust.
Wait, really? A literal setting?
Yes. If you set the temperature to 0, the AI takes the absolute most obvious, highly probable path.
So it just gives you the most generic, boring, average answer possible.
Exactly. It's called greedy decoding.
It basically walks in a perfectly straight line to the nearest cliche.
Yeah. But as the human navigator, your job is spatial steering. You introduce thermal energy to the system.
You turn up the heat.
You turn up the heat by injecting thought diversity, strange analogies, or like contradictory constraints into your prompt.
You force it to sweat a little.
To force it to jump out of that predictable, boring rut and explore the chaotic, distant corners of the vector manifold. Oh, I see.
You agitate the system, and as it processes your complex constraints, it settles into a much more profound, highly structured output.
So think of the AI right now as this incredibly powerful engine, limitless horsepower. But an engine is utterly useless without a steering wheel, an accelerator, and a driver who actually knows where they want to go.
We are the ones introducing the heat. We are the ones steering.
And that brings us to this central conflict of Weaver's essay. Because if our job is to steer across these massive, diverse intellectual landscapes, we have a major problem.
A huge problem.
Because our modern world actively punishes that kind of broad thinking.
We live under what Weaver calls the trap of hyperspecialization.
Yeah.
Modern academic and industrial cultures practically worship the narrow silo. I mean, from a very young age, the incentive structure pushes you to drill down.
It's the defining feature of the modern career path, right?
No.
You go to university and you pick a major.
Then you go to graduate school and you pick a subfield. You enter the corporate world and you become the, I don't know, senior regional director of mid-sized cardboard receptacle logistics.
Exactly. You're told to find your tiny niche, build a wall around it, and stay inside.
But why? Why are we so obsessed with silos?
Well, institutions heavily favor them for very rational bureaucratic reasons.
Like what?
Predictability. Silos offer easily measurable metrics for performance or for grant funding. It's safe.
Safe, but Weaver highlights a glaring historical paradox here.
He does. He points out that true paradigm shifts, the ideas that actually change the world, almost never originate from within a single hyper-specialized silo.
Now, I have to challenge this premise, though, because it sounds really poetic to say break down the silos.
Sure.
But if I'm going in for brain surgery tomorrow, I desperately want a hyper-specialized neurosurgeon.
Of course you do.
I do not want a polymath who splits their time between brain surgery, playing the lute, and writing botanical poetry.
No, definitely not.
Right. Isn't it incredibly dangerous to advocate for being a jack of all trades, master of none? You can't just mash two fields you barely understand together and expect to produce genius.
That is a vital distinction. And it goes straight to the heart of what Weaver's actually arguing. He is absolutely not advocating for shallow dilettantism.
Okay, so he's not saying we should just dabble in everything.
Look, not at all. To understand his point, we have to look at the overarching framework of the essay. The Triad of Recombinative Genius.
The Triad.
Weaver isolates 3 historical leaps that completely transform the modern world. And the figures responsible for these leaps did possess incredibly deep mastery.
But not in just one silo.
Exactly. They achieved it across seemingly unrelated domains. They weren't masters of none, they were masters of multiple.
Which brings us back to the hook from the beginning of the show. Let's look at the first example in this triad to see how this recombinative synthesis actually plays out in physical reality.
The Wright brothers and Samuel Pierpont Langley.
Yes, we know the bike mechanics won, but we need to understand the underlying mechanics of why the academic genius failed.
Well, to understand Langley's failure, you have to understand the paradigm of his silo.
Okay, paint the picture for us. Who was this guy?
Samuel Pierpont Langley was the secretary of the Smithsonian Institution.
Wow. Okay.
He had massive federal grants from the U.S. War Department, he had the prestige of the entire academic establishment, and he had a team of elite specialized theorists.
So he had all the resources in the world.
All of them. And he built his flying machine, the aerodrome, based on the absolute best academic physics of the 19th century.
His physics were fundamentally rooted in a different medium, right?
Yes.
He approached the sky the way an engineer approaches the ocean, or like a railroad track.
Exactly. Langley approached aeronautics through a singular static lens. He treated an airplane like a steamship.
A steamship in the sky.
The theory was, if you simply generate enough brute engine force, you can just push a rigid structure through a passive medium.
Right, just power through it.
He believed that stability meant self-righting rigidity. So he gave the wings this pronounced upward angle, a dihedral angle, just like the hull of a boat.
Assuming the air would just push the craft back to a stable center.
Right.
So he was basically trying to drive a bus on a straight highway. Step on the gas, hold the steering wheel straight, and rely on the heavy, rigid metal frame to keep you safe from the bumps.
That's a perfect analogy.
But the sky is not a highway. It is this invisible, chaotic ocean of thermal updrafts and turbulent crosswinds.
And this is where Wilbur and Orville Wright emerge. Not from a university laboratory, but from a modest shop in Dayton, Ohio.
The bike mechanics.
And they succeeded because they were quintessential cross-domain polymaths. Weaver actually breaks their genius down into 5 disparate mechanical trades they had mastered. 5, and how they synthesized them to conquer flight.
Okay, let's go through them. Let's start with their primary trade, bicycles.
Right. So as custom bicycle builders, the Wrights understood a physical truth that Langley's academic silo completely missed.
Which was
Dynamic equilibrium.
dynamic equilibrium, meaning what exactly?
It's the realization that a bicycle, at rest, simply falls over.
Right, it can't stand up on its own.
It possesses zero inherent static stability. Stability on 2 wheels requires an active, continuous physical dialogue between the pilot, the vehicle, and the momentum of the forward motion.
You don't just sit on a bike and let it do the work.
Exactly. You are constantly making microscopic adjustments. You lean into turns, you shift your weight, you steer into the fall to correct it.
The rider is literally part of the mechanical system.
Yes. And the Wrights looked at a glider and realized it would never be a steamship. It had to be a bicycle.
It had to be actively controlled by a living navigator across 3 different spatial axes: pitch, roll, and yaw.
Precisely. Langley's bus on a highway was a death trap. Flight was going to be like riding a unicycle on a tightrope in a windstorm.
Wow. Okay, so knowing how to balance a bike gives you the philosophy, but it doesn't give you wings.
Mm-hmm.
What was their second domain of mastery?
Printing presses.
Printing presses. Okay, that feels completely disconnected.
It really does.
How does a machine that prints newspapers help you fly?
It seems disconnected until you examine the mechanical reality of a 19th century printing press. It is an absolute marvel of kinematics.
Lots of moving parts.
It involves complex linkages, intermittent timing mechanisms, sprockets, chains, and differential gearing.
Okay, I'm starting to see it.
Before they built bikes, they designed, built, and repaired these custom presses. That gave them a deep, intuitive grasp of how to transfer mechanical power from a central source out to distant extremities.
Using incredibly lightweight mechanisms.
Exactly. So when it came time to hook a heavy engine up to 2 distant propellers on fragile wooden wings, they didn't use heavy metal drive shafts like the academics would.
Because that would be too heavy.
Right. They used customized bicycle chains and sprockets, guided by the kinematic principles of a printing press.
That is brilliant. They're pulling from the bicycle silo and the printing press silo. But they still had to figure out how to actually steer the plane in the air. Because Langley tried to use these heavy, cumbersome metal hinges and rudders, which just added massive weight and drag.
And that brings us to the third trade, which is almost comical.
Cardboard boxes.
Cardboard boxes. It is one of the most famous moments of spatial reasoning in history.
Tells the story.
Wilbur Wright was standing at the counter of his bike shop just talking to a customer, and he was idly fidgeting with a long, narrow cardboard box that an inner tube had come in.
Just playing around with it.
Yeah. And as he squeezed the box, twisting the opposite ends in opposing directions, he noticed something profound about the geometry.
The shape of the box deformed, but it didn't break.
Exactly. The pitch of the top and bottom surfaces altered symmetrically. One side angled up, the other side angled down. And all of this happened without any hinges, joints, or heavy metal hardware.
It was just pure, continuous mechanical elasticity.
Yes. This idle observation became the concept of wing warping. They realized they could build a wing structure out of wood and canvas that was strong enough to generate lift, but elastic enough that the pilot could pull cables to physically twist the wingtips.
Oh, wow. So by twisting the wing, one side catches more air and rises, the other side catches less and drops.
They invented the roll axis of flight by playing with a piece of trash.
That is what Weaver means by recombinative synthesis.
Yeah.
You absolutely cannot learn that from a textbook on aerodynamics.
You really can't.
But speaking of aerodynamics, they eventually hit a wall where their gliders simply weren't generating the lift that the scientific literature promised they would.
Right, and this leads to their fourth domain. The Wrights were relying on the established scientific data of the era, specifically lift tables compiled by Otto Lilienthal, and a widely accepted mathematical constant for air pressure known as Smeaton's coefficient.
The gold standard data of the time.
Yes, but their gliders kept underperforming. Now, a hyper-specialized academic might assume their own execution was flawed and defer to the established literature.
They'd say, well, the math is right, so we must be building it wrong.
But the Wrights did the exact opposite. They assumed the academic consensus was wrong.
Because they had the confidence of mechanics who deal with physical reality every day. I mean, if the bike chain slips, the math on paper doesn't matter. The chain is broken.
Exactly. So they built a custom 6-foot-long wind tunnel right in the back of their shop.
They built their own wind tunnel.
They did. And they didn't have delicate laboratory equipment. They built highly sensitive aerodynamic balance instruments out of hacksaw blades and spare bicycle spokes.
That's incredible.
Over several months, they empirically tested over 200 different miniature airfoil shapes. They meticulously measured lift and drag, and in doing so, they proved that Smeaton's coefficient was completely incorrect.
They threw out the academic textbooks.
And rewrote the laws of empirical aerodynamics using bicycle parts.
Okay, so that leaves one final hurdle. They have control, they have the correct wing shape, they have the power transfer, but they need thrust. They need propellers.
Yes, and once again, the siloed thinking of the day was dead wrong.
How so?
The academic consensus treated an aerial propeller exactly like a marine screw. The engineers were literally trying to design a shape that would bore through the air the way a screw bores through wood or water.
But air is compressible, water is not.
Exactly. The Wrights applied the data from their homemade wind tunnel and realized a propeller isn't a screw at all, it is simply a rotating wing.
So the blade of the propeller is basically generating horizontal lift.
Yes. And because the tip of the propeller spins much faster than the hub near the engine, the angle of the blade has to change continuously along its length to maintain a consistent angle of attack against the air.
Wow.
By treating the propeller as a rotary wing, they achieved an unprecedented 66% efficiency. That was a staggering leap over anything Langley or the marine engineers had produced.
This is the perfect illustration of Weaver's thesis. The Wrights did not invent the sky.
Right.
They didn't invent internal combustion. Their world-changing genius was the synthesis.
Exactly.
They took dynamic equilibrium from bicycles, power transfer from printing presses, structural elasticity from a cardboard box, empirical testing from a homemade wind tunnel, and the realization that propellers are wings.
They conquered physical space because they refused to stay confined to a single intellectual lane.
Okay, so they broke the physical paradigm. But Weaver's second example moves from the physical mechanics of the sky to the fundamental architecture of reality itself.
Yes, we move to Albert Einstein.
To appreciate the magnitude of Einstein's recombinative synthesis, we really have to look at the massive existential crisis physics was facing at the end of the 19th century, don't we?
We do, and the stage for this crisis was built by Sir Isaac Newton.
Right.
For centuries, the Newtonian model was the unquestioned bedrock of science. Newton essentially said that time is a steady, universal river. It ticks at the exact same absolute rate everywhere in the cosmos.
And space is just a rigid, empty stage where all the events of the universe happen.
It is a profoundly intuitive way to view the world. A second for me on Earth is a second for a comet flying through the solar system. A mile is a mile.
It makes total sense.
But then a Scottish physicist named James Clerk Maxwell came along and published a set of equations describing electromagnetism.
Okay.
Maxwell proved that light is an electromagnetic wave, and his math dictated that this wave must always travel at a fixed constant speed through a vacuum roughly 186,000 miles per second.
That's nice. unchanging.
Yes. And those two ideas, Newton's rigid universe and Maxwell's constant speed of light, were fundamentally mathematically incompatible.
They absolutely shattered against each other. It's a problem of relativity.
Exactly. Imagine you are standing on a fast-moving train going 100 miles per hour. You throw a baseball forward at 50 miles per hour.
Okay.
To a person standing still on the platform watching you go by, simple addition applies.
Yeah.
The baseball is moving at 150 miles per hour. The speed of the train plus the speed of the throw.
That is basic Newtonian physics.
Yeah.
The speeds compound.
But Maxwell's equation said light does not behave this way. If you stand on that same train and shine a flashlight forward, the light does not travel at the speed of the train plus the speed of light.
It just travels at the speed of light.
Yes. If you are standing still on the platform, you measure the exact same speed of light. The speed of the source doesn't matter. The speed of the observer doesn't matter. The speed of light refuses to change.
Which makes zero intuitive sense, because if I run toward a wave in the ocean, the wave should hit me faster than if I run away from it.
Right.
So how did the scientific establishment of the late 1800s deal with this massive contradiction?
They did what hyper-specialized silos often do when their foundational axioms are threatened.
Which is?
They invented an incredibly complex, convoluted patch to save the old theory. The leading academic minds of Europe invented a magical, invisible, undetectable substance called the luminiferous ether.
The ether.
Yes. They argued this ether permeated the entire universe and light was just a ripple moving through this stationary jelly.
Space jelly.
Basically, yeah. They spent decades designing incredibly complex experiments like the Michelson-Morley experiment, desperately trying to measure the Earth moving through this invisible ether.
So they were trying to invent invisible space jelly to protect Isaac Newton's legacy.
Exactly. Enter Albert Einstein.
Now, history usually paints Einstein's early career as this tragic exile. Like he was a brilliant mind who couldn't secure a university teaching position, so he was banished to bureaucratic purgatory as a third-class clerk in the Swiss Federal Patent Office in Bern.
That's the myth. But Weaver completely flips this narrative.
How so?
Weaver argues the Patent Office was not an exile at all. It was a practical synthesis chamber. It was the ultimate cross-domain laboratory.
Okay, unpack that for us.
You have to look at what was actually crossing Einstein's desk in the year 1905. Europe was experiencing a massive expansion of the railway system.
Trains everywhere.
Yes. And this industrial expansion created a very severe physical problem. Trains were crashing into each other, and scheduling was a nightmare.
Because individual railway stations could not synchronize their clocks.
Exactly. Traditionally, every town set its own clock locally by checking when the sun was highest in the sky.
So the time in one city was always a few minutes off from the city down the tracks.
Right. When trains started traveling faster than horses, this local timekeeping became deadly. So inventors flooded the patent office with electromechanical synchronization devices.
Okay, so Einstein is reviewing these patents.
Yes. The goal was to use electrical telegraph pulses sent down wires along the tracks to coordinate the gears of distant clocks.
Interesting.
Einstein spent his days meticulously reviewing the blueprints for these highly practical mechanical devices designed to enforce simultaneous time across vast distances.
So picture this. At night, Einstein is wrestling with the grand abstract crisis of Maxwell's light and Newton's absolute universe. And during the day, he is staring at literal gears, telegraph wires, and blueprints concerning how human beings actually physically measure time.
It's the perfect synthesis. This mundane, hands-on immersion forced Einstein to stop treating time as an abstract, philosophical given and start treating it as a practical problem of signal transmission.
That's a huge shift.
It is. He realized a fundamental truth. Information cannot travel instantaneously. Whether it is a mechanical gear, an electrical telegraph pulse, or a flash of light, the signal takes a finite amount of time to travel from the event to the observer.
And the delay of the signal changes the reality of the event.
Yes. And because of this unavoidable delay, Einstein realized that asking whether two distant events happen at the same time is a completely meaningless question unless you explicitly define the state of motion of the observer measuring them.
Wow.
There is no master clock for the universe. There is no universal now.
Okay, we have to walk through the famous thought experiment, the Gedanken experiment that he used to prove this.
Yeah.
The lightning strikes.
Right, the train and the lightning. So imagine you are standing precisely in the middle of a long train platform.
Okay, I'm on the platform.
At the far ends of the platform, two trees are struck by lightning. Because you are exactly halfway between them, the light from both lightning flashes travels the exact same distance to your eyes.
So they hit my eyes at the exact same time.
Yes. The signals arrive at your retinas at the exact same instant. You state, correctly from your perspective, those two strikes happen simultaneously.
It makes perfect sense. My reality says they are simultaneous.
Now, imagine a transparent train is speeding past the platform. A passenger is standing in the middle of this train.
Okay.
At the exact instant the lightning strikes, the passenger is passing directly in front of you. But the train is moving at a high speed toward the front tree and away from the back tree.
So the passenger is physically moving into the path of the light coming from the front and running away from the light coming from the back.
Precisely. The light from the front tree has slightly less distance to cover to reach the passenger's eyes because the passenger is moving to meet it. The light from the back tree has to chase the passenger, covering a slightly longer distance. Therefore, the light from the front strike hits the passenger's eyes a fraction of a second before the light from the back strike.
So the passenger says, the front tree was struck first, then the back tree.
Yes.
And I say, they were struck at the exact same time. And the terrifying part is, neither of us is wrong.
Neither is wrong. Time is entirely relative to the observer's frame of reference. This was Einstein's recombinative paradigm shift.
He took the crisis of physics and inverted it.
Completely. The academics were trying to stretch and warp the laws of light to save the rigidity of space and time. Einstein realized that if the speed of light is the one absolute unbreakable constant in the universe, then the stage itself must be flexible.
Space and time must warp and bend to ensure light always measures the same speed.
Exactly.
It is hard to overstate how deeply counterintuitive that is. To keep the speed of light constant, time literally stretches out what we call time dilation.
Yes. If you travel fast enough, your clock physically ticks slower relative to mine.
And distances literally contract. The physical length of the train shrinks. He shattered the clockwork universe. And he did it not by starting with complex, impenetrable math equations, but by using a visual thought experiment involving trains.
He synthesized the mundane mechanics of a railway schedule with the profound mystery of light.
But I have a question here that Weaver touches on in the piece. How does this realization about flexible time lead to the most famous equation in history, E equals mc2?
Ah, yes.
Like, how do train clocks lead to nuclear energy?
It is the ultimate domino effect of this synthesis. Once Einstein realized that space and time were not rigid stages, but elastic properties of the universe, he had to apply that same elastic logic to matter and momentum.
Okay, walk me through that.
In classical physics, if you push an object, it accelerates. If you keep pushing, it keeps accelerating indefinitely. But relativity established a cosmic speed limit, the speed of light.
So what happens if I take an object moving at 99.9% the speed of light, and I fire a massive rocket booster to push it faster? It can't break the light barrier. So where does all that extra pushing energy go?
It cannot translate into more velocity. The universe forbids it. So that massive input of kinetic energy has to go somewhere. Einstein realized the energy converts directly into mass.
The object literally becomes heavier, harder to push.
Yes, the energy becomes matter.
Wait, pushing an object makes it physically more massive.
Yes, and if energy can become mass, the reverse must be true. Weaver points out that Einstein synthesized this final truth. Mass is not a permanent, unchangeable block of stuff. Mass is simply concentrated, trapped energy.
It is frozen energy.
Exactly. Energy E equals mass, m, multiplied by the speed of light squared, c2. A tiny amount of mass contains a terrifying cosmic amount of bound-up energy.
He looked at telegraph synchronization patterns and ended up unlocking the energy that powers the stars.
That is the power of stepping outside the silo.
Einstein separated time from the absolute clock, proving reality is flexible. And that transitions us perfectly to the final historical figure in Weaver's triad.
Ada Lovelace.
Because our third innovator did something incredibly similar. She separated the physical gears of a machine from the abstract logic of computation itself.
To really understand Ada Lovelace's synthesis, we must first look at Charles Babbage and his analytical engine in the early 19th century.
Okay, Babbage.
Charles Babbage was an undeniably brilliant man, but he was fundamentally an engineer of arithmetic. He lived in an era where massive books of mathematical tables, logarithms, trigonometry were calculated by hand by human clerks who were literally called computers.
And humans make mistakes.
All the time. A mistake in a maritime navigation table could result in a ship crashing into a reef. So Babbage wanted to mechanize the math to eradicate human fallibility.
So he built a giant calculator.
He designed a towering, steam-driven mechanical beast composed of thousands of precisely machined brass gears and columns. But Babbage viewed his machine purely as a super abacus, a number cruncher. Ada Lovelace, the Countess of Lovelace, and the estranged daughter of the infamous Romantic poet Lord Byron, saw something entirely different.
She saw the dawn of universal symbolic computation.
Exactly.
Now, Weaver uses a beautiful phrase to describe her approach, poetical science. What does that actually mean as a cognitive framework? How do you combine the rigidity of mathematics with the fluidity of poetry?
Well, Lovelace received a fiercely rigorous education in mathematics and logic, primarily because her mother wanted to suppress any of the wild poetic tendencies inherited from Lord Byron.
She didn't want her turning out like her dad.
Right. But you cannot simply erase imagination. Lovelace retained the expansive, holistic, metaphorical imagination of a poet. Poetical science was her deliberate methodology.
So using metaphor in math.
Yes, using creative metaphor and powerful spatial imagination to visualize invisible structural relationships that pure formal logic often misses.
And she used this poetical science to make this bizarre, brilliant connection between Babbage's brass math engine and the French textile industry.
Yes. She looked at the work of Joseph-Marie Jacquard. Jacquard had revolutionized silk weaving with the Jacquard loom.
Okay.
Before him, complex tapestry patterns required a weaver to manually lift dozens of individual threads over and over. Jacquard invented a system using long chains of stiff pasteboard punch cards.
A physical card with holes punched in specific locations.
Exactly. If there was a hole in the card, a metal hook would pass through and lift the corresponding silk thread. If there was no hole, the thread stayed down.
So by stringing thousands of these binary cards together, the loom could automatically weave incredibly elaborate photorealistic portraits in silk.
It is physical binary code. Hole, no hole. 1, 0, lift, drop.
That's wild. And Lovelace saw this and connected it to the math engine.
She looked at the Jacquard loom, and she looked at Babbage's brass columns representing numbers, and her mind executed a flawless recombinative synthesis. She realized that the exact same punch cards used to direct silk threads could be fed into Babbage's machine to direct the gears. She wrote one of the most profound sentences in the history of technology. She wrote, "The analytical engine weaves algebraical patterns just as the Jacquard loom weaves flowers and leaves."
Weaves algebraical patterns. That is pure poetical science.
By making that leap, she achieved something monumental. She separated hardware from software.
The physical engine of gears and steam was just the loom.
And the punch cards were the software, the instructions independent of the machine. And she immediately took this concept further than Babbage ever dreamed.
Because if the machine is just manipulating symbols based on rules, the symbols don't have to just be numbers.
Exactly. She realized that numbers could represent anything governed by logical rules. If you assign a specific number to a specific pitch of a musical note and feed the machine the rules of harmony, the machine could compose elaborate, scientific pieces of music.
Or language.
Yes. If the numbers represent letters and the rules are grammar, the machine manipulates language. The engine wasn't a calculator, it was a universal processor. She conceived of the modern digital computer more than a century before the invention of the transistor.
And she didn't just theorize this, right? She explicitly codified it. Weaver talks about Note G.
Note G.
Lovelace was translating a French paper about Babbage's engine, and she appended her own notes. These notes were 3 times longer than the paper itself.
Note G is effectively the Magna Carta of computer science. She laid out a meticulous, step-by-step algorithm for the analytical engine to calculate a complex sequence of rational numbers called Bernoulli numbers.
So she wrote the first program.
She did. In doing so, she invented the foundational concepts of programming. She invented the loop, instructing the machine to repeat a sequence of cards. She invented the conditional branch. If the calculation results in X, jump to this punch card. If it results in Y, jump to a different card.
She literally invented the architecture of software. But I have to stop you here and push back on the implications of this. If Lovelace saw that a machine could process logic, grammar, and music, didn't she foresee artificial intelligence? Did she believe this steam-powered brain could eventually think or generate its own original ideas?
She did not. And this is a critical boundary line in Weaver's essay. It is formally known in philosophy as Lovelace's objection.
Lovelace's objection.
Despite her visionary foresight, she concluded mathematically that the machine has no pretensions to originate anything. It can only do whatever we know how to order it to perform.
Interesting.
It can follow an analysis, but it has no power of anticipating analytical relations or truths. It executes, it does not intend.
It weaves the pattern, but it does not decide what flower to weave.
Beautifully put.
So let's synthesize this triad. We have the Wright brothers synthesizing bicycles, printing presses, and cardboard to conquer the sky. We have Einstein synthesizing railway patents and electromagnetism to shatter absolute time. And we have Lovelace synthesizing mathematics and textile looms to invent software. They're true classical polymaths. They pulled from totally disparate silos to spark paradigm shifts.
Yes, they did.
But, as Weaver points out, historically, there was a massive biological constraint limiting how often this kind of genius could occur in the human species, wasn't there?
Oh, a huge constraint. The constraint is human working memory and biological time.
There are only so many hours in a day.
Exactly. Historically, achieving deep mastery in even two distinct fields took decades of exhaustive apprenticeship. You had to spend 20 years building and repairing complex printing presses before you possessed the intuitive kinematic knowledge to apply it to an airplane.
Human beings simply lack the bandwidth to hold 5 distinct master-level domains in their active working memory simultaneously.
And this brings us to the core thesis of Weaver's entire argument. This is why the essay is called the Synthetic Polymath. Artificial intelligence is about to completely shatter that biological bottleneck.
This is the intellectual inversion you mentioned at the beginning.
Yes. Generative AI fundamentally dismantles the bandwidth problem. The AI steps into the role of the instantaneous deep specialist.
Because of its vast vector manifold.
Because of the manifold, a large language model can surf millions of domain-specific parameters in milliseconds.
It has basically read every textbook on fluid dynamics, every legal precedent in contract law, every treatise on classical harmony, and it holds them all in its working memory simultaneously.
It provides the vertical analytical depth that used to require a human lifetime of siloed study. It retrieves taxonomic structures and mathematical formulations instantly.
Okay, so if the machine is now the ultimate deep specialist, what am I? If the machine knows everything, what is the role of the human being?
The human steps into the role of the system architect.
The architect.
You no longer need to manually machine every brass gear or run a wind tunnel for 6 months to test a lift table or spend weeks manually formatting the syntax of a Python script.
I delegate the rote execution to the synthetic agent.
Yes. Your job is to operate horizontally. You use the tools of the triad we just discussed to direct the machine.
Let's make this highly practical for the listener. Imagine I am a mid-level project manager or a researcher. How do I actually use the tools of Lovelace, Einstein, and the Wrights when I sit down at my computer to interact with an AI?
Well, first, you practice Lovelace's Poetical Science.
Okay.
You use your human intuition to look for higher-order analogies across disjointed fields, and you encode those analogies as semantic prompts. You don't just ask the AI to solve a standard supply chain problem. You say, analyze the supply chain bottleneck using the principles of fluid dynamics and pressurized pipe flow. You force the AI to map the logic of one silo onto the data of another.
So you become the weaver of the punch cards, you create the metaphorical structure, and the AI rapidly executes the algebra.
Exactly.
What is the Einstein method?
You execute Einsteinian Gedanken experiments. Remember, AI models inherently regress to the statistical mean. Left to their own devices, they will give you the average consensus answer derived from their training data.
The greedy decoding we talked about.
Yes. To break a paradigm, you have to construct visual, bounded thought experiments to force the AI out of its standard consensus. You make it reevaluate its coordinate assumptions.
So changing the parameters of its reality.
You say, assume a reality where X constraint does not exist. Describe the failure modes of this system from the perspective of an adversarial actor. You force a new relativistic frame of reference.
You don't just accept the absolute Newtonian answer. You put the problem on a fast-moving train.
Right.
And the third tool, the Wright brothers.
You maintain dynamic equilibrium. You must treat the AI's output, its latent space, as a turbulent, unpredictable medium, just like the wind.
So I can't just trust the first answer it gives me.
You do not just fire off one prompt and blindly trust the rigid output. You have to actively balance it through iterative, continuous dialogue. You steer the output, correcting its drift, leaning into its creative leaps, pulling it back when it hallucinates, constantly balancing the momentum of the generated thought.
The analogy that comes to mind is the conductor of a massive world-class symphony orchestra.
I like that.
If you wanted to play a symphony yourself, you would have to spend decades mastering the cello, the oboe, the timpani, the French horn. You'd be 80 years old before you played your first chord.
True.
In this new era, the AI is 1,000 master musicians sitting in the chairs, ready to play perfectly. Your job, as the synthetic polymath, is not to play the instrument. Your job is to read the score, manage the tempo, bring in the brass, quiet the strings, and ensure the entire massive system harmonizes into something beautiful and structurally sound, rather than collapsing into chaotic noise.
It is a profound shift in human value. The human provides the associative spark and the spatial architecture. The machine provides the instantaneous execution.
But I see a massive structural problem here. If the machine is handling all the specialized execution, the coding, the drafting, the data sorting, what exactly should human beings be learning in school? Because right now, our entire educational system, from kindergarten to corporate training, is exclusively designed to turn us into specialized executors. We go to school to learn how to play the oboe.
That's the crisis.
Weaver argues that our current educational model is fundamentally broken for this new reality, doesn't he?
He is unsparing in his critique. For decades, the modern educational complex has doubled down on narrow vocational technical training. We teach students to write routine code, to draft standard legal boilerplate, to construct basic financial models in Excel.
Right, highly practical, specific skills.
Weaver calls these the arts serviles, the mechanical trades of execution.
The arts of the servant. They wrote manual labor of the intellect. And those are precisely the tasks that generative AI can perform in milliseconds.
Exactly. Just as Babbage built his brass engine to automate the human computers who were doing rote arithmetic, modern neural networks are automating modern syntactic grunt work.
So learning syntax is a dead end.
When syntax, routine calculation, and boilerplate generation become essentially free, infinite commodities, training human beings to act as human compilers is literally preparing them for irrelevance.
So if hyper-specialized vocational training is a dead end, what is the curriculum for the synthetic polymath? If I am not learning how to format a spreadsheet or memorize case law, what should my brain be doing?
Weaver demands an urgent, widespread revival of the classical liberal arts, what the ancients called the artes liberalis, the crafts of the free mind.
Now, I have to jump in here and speak to the listener because the term liberal arts carries a lot of modern baggage.
It does.
When people hear that, they think of exorbitant university tuition, sitting under a tree reading ancient Greek poetry, and then graduating with 0 employable skills. It sounds elitist, highly theoretical, and practically useless in a tech-driven economy.
And Weaver addresses that misconception directly. The classical liberal arts were never meant to be useless aesthetic indulgence. They were the rigorous cognitive technologies required to govern systems and navigate complex realities.
Okay, how does he map that?
Weaver maps the liberal arts directly onto the practical skills required to pilot artificial intelligence. Let's start with rhetoric and dialectic.
How does ancient debate help me use a supercomputer?
Because navigating AI is no longer about writing rigid, deterministic machine code like C++ or Python. You are communicating in natural language. It is a Socratic dialogue.
Right.
Dialectic is the art of logical argumentation and uncovering truth through rigorous questioning. When the AI gives you a massive, complex output, you need dialectic skills to formulate precise, piercing inquiries.
You have to know how to talk to it.
You need rhetoric to frame the analogies correctly. You need to be able to instantly spot logical fallacies or circular reasoning hidden within the AI's beautifully formatted paragraphs.
Imagine I am that commuter working in corporate strategy. The AI generates a 50-page market analysis. My value isn't that I can read it faster. My value is my ability to engage the AI and say, your conclusion relies on the unstated premise that consumer behavior in Sector A mirrors Sector B. Provide the historical data that proves that premise, or rewrite the analysis assuming the premise is false.
Yes, that is dialectic.
You have to know how to interrogate the machine to squeeze the truth out of it. Okay, what about the next pillar? History, philosophy, and letters.
This is the Einstein method. We established that AI models tend to echo the shallow statistical consensus of their training data. They will confidently tell you the world is flat if enough of the internet says so.
Right.
To steer an AI beyond this consensus, the human operator must possess an internal, heavily stocked library of mental models. You need to know historical failure modes. You need philosophy to teach you how to challenge hidden axiomatic assumptions.
Right. Einstein could challenge Isaac Newton, the most unshakable consensus in the history of science, because Einstein had extensively read the philosophers David Hume and Ernst Mach.
Exactly. He knew how to question the fundamental nature of observation and reality. If you don't know history, you won't recognize when the AI is hallucinating a comforting lie.
That makes total sense. And the third pillar?
The third pillar of the Artis Liberalis is geometry, kinematics, and spatial mechanics. This is the Wright brothers' method.
Spatial reasoning.
True systems thinking requires qualitative spatial reasoning. Even if you aren't building a physical machine, you need to intuitively sense when a generated conceptual model is drifting off balance.
You have to feel it.
You need to sense when a supply chain algorithm or a software architecture is structurally fragile. You need to recognize when the AI has driven you into an artificial local maximum, a solution that looks mathematically perfect on paper but will collapse the moment it touches the friction of reality.
So to the mid-level accountant or the junior front-end developer listening right now, Weaver is not saying you should quit your job, abandon your field, and go become a philosopher.
No, not at all.
He is saying you must elevate your interaction with your field. Stop competing with the machine on rote execution. Let the AI do the data entry, the syntax formatting, the code compilation. You must step up and become the architect.
Use dialectic to interrogate the financial models. Use history to anticipate market shifts.
The human stops being the biological calculator and becomes the strategic director. But there is one final, incredibly critical piece to this entire puzzle.
Yes, there is.
It is the heaviest part of Weaver's essay, because being a synthetic polymath with a liberal arts mindset isn't just about coaxing clever, highly efficient answers out of a machine. How do you know if the AI is actually producing something good?
Right. And this brings us to Weaver's concept of taste.
Taste. Now, normally, we use that word to describe aesthetics. Knowing what a good painting looks like or knowing what kind of music is sophisticated. How does taste apply to artificial intelligence?
Weaver defines taste much more rigorously. Taste is the ultimate human fitness function.
The fitness function.
It is our visceral, hard-earned pattern recognition. It is our ability to evaluate whether an AI's output possesses resonance, structural integrity, and ultimately objective truth. Because if we lack taste and we simply rely on the free market or algorithms to dictate what is good, we end up in a very dark place.
Because algorithms optimizing for market value just optimize for engagement. They figure out what makes us angry or addicted, and they feed it back to us.
Exactly. If taste is merely market-driven, we optimize for addictive engagement loops, hyper-efficient exploitation, and hollow cultural noise. Weaver argues that true taste must be grounded in what he calls the river of reality.
The river of reality.
And evaluating this reality operates on 3 distinct levels of complexity.
Okay, let's climb the ladder. How do we test the machine? Level I.
Level I is the Babbage test. When the AI gives you an output, you ask, is this mathematically, factually, and syntactically correct? Does 2 + 2 = 4? Is the Python script free of syntax errors?
And to be honest, machines are basically perfect at level I right now. A calculator passes level 1.
Right. Level 2 is the Wright's test. You look at the output and ask, is this structurally coherent and dynamically balanced? If the AI generates a new logistical supply chain or a new aerodynamic shape, will it actually function in physical reality without collapsing under friction or stress?
Does the physics hold up? And with advanced simulation, machines are getting incredibly good at optimizing level 2.
They are. But level 3 is the ultimate hurdle, and the one the machine can never cross on its own.
What's level 3?
This is the Lovelace and Einstein test. When you look at the trajectory and the application of the AI's output, you must ask, does this align with human dignity, objective truth, and the flourishing of the human spirit?
Whoa. That is a massive leap from checking if the code has a bug.
It is the defining leap of the synthetic polymath, and it brings us right back to Lovelace's objection.
The idea that it can't originate anything.
Mathematical optimization has absolutely no conscience. An AI algorithm will perfectly optimize a complex global supply chain to distribute humanitarian relief food to starving people with incredible life-saving efficiency.
Which is miraculous.
But that exact same algorithm with the exact same mathematics will optimize an oppressive totalitarian surveillance apparatus to track, hunt, and imprison political dissidents with identical indifference.
It doesn't care.
The machine answers the question how. It cannot and will never answer the questions why or should.
It has limitless horsepower, but it has no moral compass whatsoever. But let me push back here, because the tech industry claims they're solving this.
Yeah.
Can't we just program safety filters into the AI? Can't we just hard code level 3 into the software, put guardrails in the system prompt that say, Don't be evil, prioritize human rights.
Weaver dismisses that approach entirely. He calls hard-coded corporate safety filters brittle walls erected on an elastic manifold.
Brittle walls.
You cannot impart wisdom to a mathematical matrix with a software patch. You cannot code morality into a vector space. True alignment requires human wayfinding in real time. The human operator has to be the moral compass.
But I struggle with that too. Humans are terrible at moral alignment. Look at history. If the human operator is the moral compass, aren't we just going to teach the AI our own biases, our own greed, our own blind spots? How do we actually impart higher-order taste without corrupting it?
It requires immense discipline, which is why the liberal arts are so vital. Weaver uses a brilliant, highly practical metaphor to explain how this human-machine moral interaction must work. He compares it to CAPTCHA.
CAPTCHA, you mean the annoying little security grids on websites where I have to click all the squares containing a traffic light or a crosswalk to prove I'm a human being?
Yes. Think about what CAPTCHA actually achieved over the last decade. It wasn't just a security gate. Millions of humans, day after day, year after year, clicked on crosswalks, cats, bicycles, and fire hydrants.
Yeah, training the visual models.
Those billions of microinteractions functioned as a massive crowdsourced teaching mechanism. Human beings, simply by identifying reality, taught early machine vision algorithms how to recognize the physical world. We gave the machine sight through our clicks.
We guided its pattern recognition pixel by pixel.
Exactly. Weaver argues that in the era of generative AI, human navigators must impart higher-order taste through an embodied apprenticeship in the co-reasoning loop. We have to act as moral CAPTCHAs for the AI.
So it's not a one-time programming patch, it's a continuous daily friction.
Yes. When you collaborate with an AI in your office, in your home, you must deliberately exert your human agency. You must actively reject sterile, toxic, or hollow coordinates.
Every single time you use it.
When the AI gives you a highly efficient but ethically bankrupt solution, you must correct it. You have to raise the annealing temperature to break the AI out of dogmatic, algorithmic traps. You have to hold the system morally accountable in every interaction. The human acts as the vital teleological anchor.
Teleological, meaning providing the ultimate purpose, the final end goal.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The machine possesses immense, terrifying computational velocity, but velocity without direction is just an explosion.
Wow.
The human operator must tie that velocity to the eternal truths of human flourishing. That is the true, ultimate job of the synthetic polymath.
Man, we have covered a staggering amount of ground today. Let's synthesize this entire journey for the listener. We are standing at the end of the era of the hyper-specialized silo. For a century, the industrial and academic world forced human beings to act like biological calculators. We were told to pick one tiny field, put our heads down, and execute rote tasks. But artificial intelligence is stripping away that mechanical drag. The machine is now the deep specialist.
And by delegating the rote computation, the syntax, and the mechanical execution to synthetic agents, we liberate the human mind. We are free to return to the classical ideal. We can synthesize disparate truths across multiple domains, we can steer high-dimensional discovery, and we can ground this incredible, world-altering technological power in human moral wisdom.
So, for everyone listening, the call to action here is deeply personal and immediate. Start looking for the chaotic intersections in your own life and your own work. Do not be afraid to pull from outside your comfortable silo. Practice Lovelace's Poetical Science. Challenge the established consensus like Einstein.
Absolutely.
If you are a software coder, go read some Stoic philosophy or ancient history.
Yeah.
If you were a corporate marketer, go study the fluid mechanics of a river or the dynamic equilibrium of a bicycle. Look for the connections. Elevate your perspective above the execution layer.
The future undeniably belongs to the navigators, the architects, the polymaths.
It really does. But it leaves me with one final kind of haunting thought extending from Weaver's text.
What's that?
If artificial intelligence truly removes the biological bottleneck, if the machine gives us back the decades of time and the working memory we used to spend memorizing syntax and formatting, allowing us to master multiple domains instantly through the AI, what becomes the new bottleneck for human progress?
That is the ultimate question we have to face.
Is the new bottleneck simply the limits of our own imagination? Is it our sheer lack of courage to finally abandon those comfortable, predictable, safe silos we've built our entire careers and identities around? Or perhaps, and this goes right back to level 3 taste, the new bottleneck is simply our willingness to bear the heavy, terrifying moral responsibility of being the one who actually steers the ship.
We have built the perfect engine. It has limitless power. Now we have to decide where we are driving.
Exactly. A perfectly tuned engine is completely useless without a destination. And today, whether we feel ready for it or not, we're all sitting in the driver's seat. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Start steering. We'll see you next time.